Alright, welcome to our first fly tying adventure. The first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to make ourselves what I like to call an indestructible woolly bugger. That means it's going to sink really well, and it is also going to have copper wire in it so it will stay together fairly well. We're going to start out with a number 8 hook, and we're going to use we're going to make a green one, and we're going to go ahead and put some red thread on there and get that all the way down to the barb. And this, what I mean by indestructible, is we're going to probably take a little bit of extra time and glue a lot of the different parts with some head cement so that they do stay together even after many fish, because I anticipate that we will catch many fish with this lure. This is a woolly bugger. It's going to be a green one. We're using a .25 lead, and we are putting that one around so that, and some people like to use the beads. I will on another one on another day put a bead in there. We've also pinched our barb so that it makes for a quicker hook set, in addition to the fact that it makes it easier for the hook to come out when we are done playing the fish and we have it landed and in the net, before we take a very fast picture and get the fish back into the water. So what we've got is we've got some lead weight on there, and that's going to help that thing sink down into the water column depending on how deep it is. And we're just going to maybe, depending on how deep it is and depending what kind of fly line you use, will determine whether it's going to be bouncing around on the bottom or whether it is going to be just sort of above the bottom, or whether it's just going to be below the surface, depending on how quickly you pull it in. So we've got our thread, and we've got that threaded up pretty good. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of put a little head cement in that section so that it stays completely ready to go and will stay nice and together after the fish bite on it for a little while, which is ultimately what we want them to do. So we wrap that in there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the tail. And the tail is going to be made out of some blood quill. And we're going to get a piece of section out of that. This is our blood quill, which is going to be a green or olive color. And that's a really nice piece right there. I think we'll use that one. So we get that together like that. And then put it on there. And you may think it looks a little sloppy now, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to snip that off and make that look really good. And we'll snip that piece off there and get rid of that. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a little, in the name of construction, solid construction, we're going to put some more of that head cement on there so that we're always ready to make it what we like to call indestructible. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of copper wire. You may not be able to see that on the camera, but that's a copper wire, and we're going to tie that in and make sure that we flip it over and tie that in. That's our copper wire, which is going to go over the chenille after we put the chenille on. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our blood quill away so that the cat doesn't get it. Put that over there so we make sure that we put it away after we're done. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get us some chenille. And while we do that, we've got to make sure we have our other feather for when we're done with the chenille. We want to make sure that as we do these videos that we have all of our parts with us so we don't have to do any editing afterwards. And so we're going to go ahead and tie that piece of chenille in there. That may be a little long, but that's okay. Chenille is cheap, and so we're not really worried about using any extra chenille. That thing costs about $3 for a whole packet of it, so we're not going to worry about that. And then we've got our copper wire in there now, and we've also got our chenille wrapped in there. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap that hackle in there. And once we do that, probably won't glue in the hackle, I'm not really worried about that as much. And in the interest of time, we're just going to make sure that we wind that all the way back to here. And so now what we've got a piece of copper wire, we've got our piece of chenille, and we've got our hackle, which is going to make for an extremely lifelike woolly bugger as we get everything going. So got a good profile now on the body, and we're going to be using red thread. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring the chenille up, and we bring the chenille, tie it on there, pull it around, make sure it's tight. We have plenty of glue, and glue will help the chenille stay in place. And we'll bring it up. We're not going to crowd the head. We're going to leave plenty of room for the head, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap that in. And actually I didn't have too much. I can maybe make a number 12 later on with this extra piece of chenille. So we're going to go ahead and tie that in now. That's all tied in. And then what I like to do is I like to take this copper wire and just go through the chenille, which just makes it just a little bit more indestructible, and also makes it so that it is, we tie that in there, and that also makes it, gives it a little more weight. And we use our junky scissors when we're cutting wire rather than our really expensive scissors when we're cutting wire. And we make sure we have a whole bunch of that on there. We've got plenty of room on that head to tie off our leader. And then the next thing, which is the last thing we're going to do, is we're going to go ahead and tie in our hackle. And we tie it in as far as we can and make it just look really buggy. Some people like to do it a little bit more than others as far as how many times they wrap it around. It's personal preference, but I think what you're going to find is that no matter what you get, you end up with what I consider to be a really good woolly bugger. And we're wrapping that. And we're going to be ready for some trout when this thing's done. And so that's it there. And then we're going to take a whip finisher, and we're going to go like this and whip finish. So we have a nice red head which will attract a little bit. We've got copper wire to hold it together really well. And we're going to name it, I think is what we should do. I mean, for one, we have plenty of room left for the hook to be tied off, and we just do that so the glue doesn't get in the eye of the hook. And we put a little bit of head cement on there. Then we're going to let that dry for a day or so. We don't need to get out there today. And there you have it. That is called Billy's Booger. It's a woolly bugger, and it catches trout, catches bass. Every once in a while it'll catch a bluegill. And I think that once you learn how to tie those, you'll be ready to catch just about anything.